Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, PBM, Customers Bank, Collins Building Services, AmTrust Title Insurance Company, Marks Paneth, Capital One Bank. Additional funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from Amerant Bank, Bank of America, Citizens Bank, Dime Community Bank, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handro Properties LLC Handler Real Estate Organization, Hodges Ward Elliott Inc., Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Catsimatidis Red Apple Group, Keysight Capital Partners, New Banks, Meridian Capital Group, Ocean First Bank, People's United Bank, RPW Group, TD Bank, and these friends. New Rochelle, Englewood, Ramaz, GW, Florida, Staten Island, New Jersey. Real estate? A woman real estate developer who could build buildings? Oh, no way. But maybe at the age of 35, it's time to do it. So I have the founding principal, the head person at Tantum Real Estate, Debra Tantleff. Thanks for being here.
Pleasure.
So since we know it's a short history, tell us about your mother's side. Now we're going to start with your father's side and then your mother's side of how they came to America and how they immigrated and the Orbach story and a couple of other stories about Dow Chemical. So tell me that.
I'm all from Poland. My great-grandfather on my father's side came from Poland and settled in New York. He raised my grandfather and his couple of brothers in Williamsburg. My great-grandfather was an ice packer. He would cut ice and put it in old ice boxes. And my grandfather then grew up in Williamsburg and eventually became a lawyer. My grandmother also lived in Sheepshead Bay, and she met my grandfather on the boardwalk in Coney Island. And they got married and they raised my father and my aunt in Sheepshead Bay. They passed away when I was young, when I was 5 and 6 years old. My grandparents both passed away. And on my mother's side, so my great-great-grandfather came from Stanislav at the turn of the century. And he had owned a brewery in Stanislav, and there was an accident in the factory and a non-Jew was killed. And so he escaped with his family because he was in fear of a pogrom. And so he came to New York with his 3 children, one of whom was my great-grandmother. And he settled in New York. And after about 6 years, decided that he wasn't loving it here so much and decided to go back to Poland to see if he could, get some of his inheritance and resume the life that he knew. So he went back with my great-grandmother, who at the time was then married, and she brought a 1-year-old infant back with her, who was my great-aunt, my grandfather's sister. Because my great-aunt, my Aunt Lottie, had been born here, so in the late 1920s, she came here and she emigrated here. And she went to Orbach's department store in New York, and she went up to Mr. Orbach, this little 4'8" woman my whole life, and said, "We're from the same town in Stanislav, you have to give me a job." And so as a teenager, she got a job, and she eventually brought my grandfather over and my grandfather's brother and my great-grandmother, my Bobby. My grandfather started at Orbach's as a packer at the cashier. He would pack up your purchases. He eventually rose to be a vice president of the store, and his main area of focus, for most of my life, was he was really responsible for the shoe department and the fashions. And so he would travel to Europe every year and, identify all the new coming fashions and bring them back so that Orbox could knock them off. And now my grandmother, her family was also from Poland. My great-grandfather immigrated to outside Scranton. And my grandmother went to Drexel University for college, which at the time was pretty remarkable. And she went and got a job at Orbox and wound up working for my grandfather. And so the first weekend that they went out, they were caught, and somebody from the store saw them. And, back in that day, it was really not kosher to date your employees. So my grandmother quit so that she could stay dating my grandfather. And she moved to Bloomingdale's to be a buyer at Bloomingdale's. And she eventually spent her entire career as a professor at FIT, the Fashion Institute of Technology. She was in their purchasing department, and she wrote their retail textbooks in the purchasing department, which are still in production to this day. She retired, I want to say, in her mid-80s, and I think they're on the 9th edition of her textbook.
And Grandma's still alive at 99.
Grandma is 99, and God bless her. We have an amazing relationship. She's a remarkable woman and an incredible matriarch of the family. And she and my grandfather, very big factors in my life. They moved to Queens. And what happened was my grandmother was living in Brooklyn. My grandfather was living in the Bronx when they were dating. And my Bobby said, "Winter's coming. You guys have to get married. I don't want you commuting on the subway too long." So they got married and they moved to Queens, and they raised my mother and my uncle in a very, traditional Orthodox, conservative Orthodox environment. My mom and my uncle went to Sedgwick camp. My mom was a B'nai B'rith girl. They were very involved in UJA. And so when my mom went to college, she went to NYU, and she wound up meeting my father, who was also raised in an Orthodox Jewish environment. He went to Brooklyn Talmudic Academy for high school and Brooklyn College. And he and my mom met at a singles weekend in Grossingers in the Catskills. And so they got married and moved to New Rochelle, and they raised me and my brother in New Rochelle.
Talk to me about Mom, because Mom also got involved with business. She was a female executive at Dow Chemical.
Yes, so my mom was a very motivated professional. She worked in Union Carbide, which is now owned by Dow Chemical. She was at the top of their marketing division in their biocides and pesticides division. And she would travel nationally and internationally. She traveled quite frequently, promoting their products and negotiating their business. It was a wonderful childhood, though. My mom would come home. I had an incredible doll collection of every place that she traveled. And she was always home. My parents got divorced when I was young. My father stayed in New Rochelle as well, but I always was with my parents for Shabbat, right? I was either at my mom's or my dad's, and we grew up. Friday night was meant to sit around the table and talk about the week and talk about Israel and talk about politics. And because my mom traveled the world so much, she had the opportunity to really expose us to a lot of different ways of thinking and different cultures and different opportunities.
So let's talk about you, baby. When were you born?
So I was born in November of '78. I have one older brother who's was born in '75. And I was born and raised in New Rochelle. And we stayed in New Rochelle until my mom met and married my stepfather. New Rochelle was a wonderful community. I'm still dear friends with my closest friend from kindergarten. And so my mom met Hank when I was about 10, right around the time of my brother's bar mitzvah. And they got married and decided to get married in the summer, and we moved to Englewood because my mom wanted to make sure that they were married and we were settled in by the time school started. So when I was 12 and I was entering 7th grade, we moved to Englewood, which was a conscious decision. My mom worked in Connecticut. Hank he was the professor and the chair of the history department at the County College of Morris. So they each had a little less than an hour commute. And my brother was just starting high school. And so he went into high school in the city, and he went to Irma's while I finished up elementary school at Mariah.
So tell me about the summers. I know you went to camp.
Jewish Sleepaway Camp is an amazing experience, right? That you carry with you. I'm still friends with many of my friends from back then. I would do summer trips on touring the West Coast. I did a summer tour of Israel. I did a summer program in Paris, studying at the university there and learning architecture. Both my parents, my grandparents, my aunt, my uncle education was very important to us, and exposing us to the world was very important to my family. And they worked very hard to give us the opportunities that we would remember.
So you graduate Ramaz, okay? And then how do you decide to go to George Washington?
It was kind of an easy decision. I have two older stepsisters as well. My oldest stepsister graduated there. My brother was there at the time. I also got a merit scholarship. So collectively, it made it a very easy decision that I felt very at home there. So I started at George Washington. I moved to DC, and I was an English major and an art history minor. And I did that for a couple of years, and my brother graduated, and I just wasn't that focused. So I decided to take a couple of years off, and I moved to Florida to really kind of figure some stuff out and think about what I really wanted to do.
Now, you were involved with data. What were you doing? Data services?
I was doing database research, and I was generating corporate accounts we represented various hotels and resorts. And so we did a lot of work generating corporate accounts and generating corporate retreats to those different hospitality businesses.
So then you moved to Staten Island, okay?
Yeah.
And in Staten Island, you worked for a plumbing contractor?
Yeah, so I met a nice Italian guy while I was living in Florida and decided it was time to go back to school, and I decided to go back to Rutgers. And given that he was from Staten Island, it was a easy, convenient opportunity. We both moved back up north together. And I transferred to Rutgers, where I went to their communication school, and I focused on organizational communication. And I wound up moving to Staten Island with this guy. I wound up getting a job at a temp agency during winter break. I needed some quick cash. It was a 3-week gig. And the woman at the temp agency said, I have a tough guy for you, but I think you guys will get along. And so I started as a secretary answering phones. It was a union plumbing and heating contracting company. And they had a new construction division and a service division. And my initial job for that 3-week period was to schedule service calls and schedule leaky faucet repairs and changing toilets and just keeping the guys organized and the customers' expectations managed on when the guys were going to show up. I really clicked with my boss. He was a commanding officer in the Navy Reserves. He was brilliant at the work that he did, a very hard worker. And I wound up staying there about 2.5 years, full-time, part-time, kind of depending upon my work schedule. And he taught me the business. He taught me how to build. We were a general contractor as well on smaller renovations. By the time I left there, I was overseeing their warehouse and all their material deliveries. I was responsible for all their billing, all of their renovations, all the customer service. And it was a bittersweet parting. He was really excited for me, and at the same time, he was sad to see me go. But he told me a building is just a kitchen on top of a kitchen that backs up to a bathroom that's on top of a bathroom, and if you can remember that, you'll be fine.
So I have a question. What were you doing at Rutgers? What were you majoring in? You weren't thinking about being involved with real estate.
No, I was
about it. Okay, you were a liberal arts major. You like reading.
I was in the School of Communication. I was focusing on public relations and organizational communication, which is kind of corporate social psychology, if you will. I had no appreciation for real estate whatsoever. When I was younger, Hank He owned a number of rooming houses and laundromats, and I used to go with him to collect rent. But I always saw that as an exercise in exposing me to people of other economic levels, exposing me to other cultures and races, and as a way of teaching me not to be afraid when I'm in an environment that I'm not comfortable. I never at all saw it as real estate. And even when I was at Rutgers, I felt like I was in construction and I was, on the building side of things. And so it was really kind of only a matter of time, given the extensive education that my family saw that I secured, and given the cultural background that I was raised in, that my family was kind of like, this is great, you're paying your bills, but this is not really what we had in mind for you. And so I wound up getting put on kind of a Jersey builder circuit of different Jewish builders who were involved in the Jersey market. And the first meeting that I had was with one of the Holocaust families who had a very large real estate development firm, a longtime family friend. And it was a very honest conversation where, I was 20 years old at the time. And he said, Deb, it's great to call you. I'm happy to talk to you, but unless you're interested in finance, as a woman, I'm just not sure there's a good fit for you here in my construction side. And I kind of said, listen, I'm a builder. I'm not into the real estate side of things or the money side of things. I'll see you at the holidays. Thanks for your time. And I wound up meeting with one of the principals at Roseland Property Company, Brad Klatt, who I got connected to because he was in the same synagogue as my uncle. And he sat me down for 2 hours, 7:30 on a Tuesday morning. And he said, I know exactly the environment that you were raised in, and I'm going to talk to you like you're my daughter because you're not that much older than her. And as a nice young Jewish girl who grew up in the world you live in, I would really like to see you expand your thinking. And I wouldn't want to see you on a construction site your whole life. And I kind of said, thanks for the advice. I'm a builder. I work for a plumber. I have the worst mouth in the office. You're going to have to do better. And so after 2 hours, he spent probably an hour and 45 minutes trying to tell me to think differently. And then the last 15 minutes of the meeting, he offered me a job. And he called up the head of our construction company at the time. We were just starting a project right in downtown New Brunswick, a few blocks from my classes. And they needed a secretary in the construction trailer. And so I said, all right, I'll go check it out. And so I showed up at the job. Before I accepted, I wanted to make sure I was ready. And I showed up at the project and they were doing a 1,000-yard concrete pour and I was mesmerized. And the project manager was this big, burly Polish guy who built Marriotts around the world. And he had no idea what to make of me. He just saw me as some little privileged kid that corporate sent down. And I spent the day there and we clicked. And we really got along. And I wound up working directly under him for 2 years in the field while we built this building. It was a 400+ unit project. And I was the only woman on the job. And so it was a difficult environment for sure. And he would come in early and he would stay late and he would teach me how to read drawings and he would walk the building with me when it wasn't really acceptable for me to be walking during the day while the work was going on. And he really took me under his wing and showed me how to build. And he showed me how to convert what's on paper two-dimensionally into a 3D house and a home for someone. And I stayed in the field for a couple of years. Then I went back to Brad and I said, well, when you hired me, you told me I was going to be here for a couple of years and then you were going to kick me out. I guess it's time to go. And he said, you're not leaving. And so they moved me into their corporate construction department and I did the purchasing and estimating of the projects before they went into the ground. And then they started talking to me about going to grad school and I resisted. And so Brad was pretty insistent and he made me kind of start researching programs. And eventually I came back in and I chose the NYU SHAC program, which was a very finance intensive program. And so as I was starting classes, Roseland moved me over to the development side of the company. And I started working under one of the operating partners. And so periodically Brad would check on me and go, okay, have you picked your major yet? And so I came in and I said, I'm going to do construction management. And he proceeded to kick me out of his office and said, come back when you have the right answer. And so about a month or so later, I went into my other partner, Marshall's office. And I said, okay, I'm going to do the development major. And he looked at me and he said, what are you going to learn there that I'm not going to teach you? Get out, close the door, come back with the right answer. And so I finally came back. I said, there's no choices left. It's the only one left is finance. And Brad said, that's it. That's the one piece you can't learn in the field. You can't learn on the fly. And you need this. If you really want to be the holistic developer I think you're capable of, you need that background. And it was a very challenging degree for me. But it was probably one of the most valuable decisions that I had made because it gave me the ability to talk to my lenders in a different way, and gave me a certain confidence about not just being able to move the money around, but understanding how the deal would be put together. And so I was now on their development side in their development team. And I eventually got promoted to a vice president. And I oversaw their Morristown portfolio. As well as a number of projects on the Hudson River waterfront. And Roseland was a very horizontal and holistic organization. So I was responsible for everything and anything involved on my project. And so from start to finish, my fingerprints would be on all of it. And it was a remarkable education. We had exceptional projects. We were transforming communities. And
so how do you decide to wake up one day and say, I want to be a women's minority-owned business? I want to be in the real estate business. Was it the arrow that pointed to you when you were at Young Kippa Services? What happened?
So we were acquired by Matt Calley, and I was just trying to figure out the next step. I could have stayed at Roseland and I would have had a wonderful career ahead of me. But it was the right time in my life. It was the right time in the market. And I was sitting in synagogue on Yom Kippur, and kind of this white light came down and said, it's time. And I had 1,000 apartments under construction by myself that I was running. And so I waited and closed out those projects and eventually decided I was going to open up on my own. And I opened up as a woman business enterprise solely for the fact that I've worked harder for everything in my career because I'm a woman. And if it was going to position me for opportunities or for capital in a different way, then so help me. And so I'm based out of Jersey City, and we're a boutique firm. We do our own projects and we do a slew of advisory services. We work for property owners and other developers and institutions. And I'm very involved in the industry at large. And so we really focus on all shapes and sizes of housing product and redevelopment product throughout New Jersey. You know, we have a variety of products from the Class A market rate. We're working on a veteran housing project in an effort to really spur some more boutique affordable housing assets, as well as really looking at, you know, policies and opportunities to help create more middle income housing and some of that workforce housing product that's missing. And it's fantastic. It's fun. It's exciting. You know, it's wonderful products. I love housing. I really enjoy the business, but there's something monumental about redevelopment and being able to create homes and communities that allow for people to live in the way that they want to live.
Let's talk a little bit about the Rutgers program and some of the community involvement that you're involved with and charitable involvements.
So I'm very involved in the industry. It's been very good to me, and I have an obligation to be good to it. And so I'm very involved in the New Jersey Builders Association, where we really advocate for thoughtful housing policy, you know, top down. And the Rutgers Real Estate Center is a real estate program that we started about 5 years ago at Rutgers that offers both undergraduate and graduate level courses. And it's remarkable. I mean, the student interface it's about 35% women, which is, when I was coming up, we didn't exist in the industry. It's an extraordinary group of students, and it's incredible to be able to be part of the curriculum that is shaping these people, identify internship opportunities for them, and really mold the next generation of industry professional. It's incredibly rewarding.
And charitable-wise, the Friends of the IDF and APAC and...
So yes, I mean, growing up, charity was a huge part of my world. And so the Friends of the IDF is an organization that's very dear to me, which supports Israeli soldiers, which is, I think, how I really decided to pursue some veteran housing initiatives. It was kind of the culmination of everything I care about. Very involved in APAC and advocacy for the Israel relationship. And the Simon Wiesenthal Center is a very important organization to me. The idea of social sustainability and social impact is just something that I think kind of permeates the way that I think and the way that I approach development and interface in a community. I think it's very much because of the important value that was placed on charitable endeavors as I was raised.
So, it's interesting. You could have been a communications, PR person, but you've built your own PR because people know you and they respect you. And you've been, recently listed in the top 40 real estate executives in New Jersey. Fortunately, maybe the plumbing job really helped you out. Okay. It gave you the venue over there, and following your grandmother and your mother, and your father and everybody has shown that ethics over there and doing well. I'd love to thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It's always wonderful to see you.